Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Test Those Breasts podcast. I am your host, Jamie Vaughn. I'm a retired teacher of 20 years and a breast cancer thriver turned staunch, unapologetic, loud supporter and advocate for others, bringing education and awareness through a myriad of medical experts, therapists, caregivers, and other survivors. A breast cancer diagnosis is incredibly overwhelming with the mounds of information out there, especially on Dr. Google. I get it. I'm not a doctor, and I know how important it is to uncover accurate information, which is my ongoing mission through my nonprofit. The podcast includes personal stories and opinions from breast cancer survivors and professional physicians, providing the most up-to-date information at the time of recording. Evidence, research, and practices are always changing, so please check the date of the recording and always refer to your medical professionals for the most up-to-date information. I hope you find this podcast a source of inspiration and support from my guests. Their contact information is in the show notes, so please feel free to reach out to them. We have an enormous breast cancer community ready to support you in so many ways. Now let's listen to the next episode of Test Those Breasts. Well, welcome back, friends, to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I am your host, Jamie Vaughn, and today I am so excited to tell you that this is the 100th episode of this podcast. It is a milestone that means so much to me. What started as a way to make sense of my own experience has become a space for connection, truth-telling, and healing, a place where stories remind us that we are never alone in what we carry. Today's episode is called Turning Fear into Freedom, How Storytelling Heals the Body, Mind, and Spirit. The conversation isn't just about surviving cancer. It's about rising emotionally, spiritually, and creatively. It's about what happens when we give voice to what we once silenced and how storytelling becomes medicine for the body, mind, and soul. Each woman you will hear from today embodies a different dimension of transformation through writing, identity, and motherhood through April, resilience and embodiment through Melissa, and faith and surrender through Sarah. Today, together, they show us that healing isn't about returning to who we were. It's about becoming who we were meant to be. Before we meet them, I am so honored to welcome someone very special to me, Gillian Lichota. Gillian is the founder of the I Rise Above Foundation and the lead author of Rising Above, Our Transformational Journey to Wholeness After Breast Cancer. I originally met Gillian a couple of years ago, and since then, we've become close friends, connected by a shared understanding of what it means to rise through the pain and rebuild with purpose. She's been on this podcast before, and last April I had the privilege of traveling with her and other survivors to Peru through her foundation's healing retreats, experiences that are as spiritual as they are transformative. Gillian's work creates sacred spaces where women can feel seen, supported, and whole again. She reminds us that healing isn't about burying our pain, but about transforming it, giving it shape, giving it purpose, giving it voice. Gillian, it is such an honor to have you back on my show. You and I have had so many conversations in the past, and I'm so excited that you're the lead author in this book, and I just welcome you. How are you doing?
Hi, Jamie. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back. I'm super excited to be returning with my co-authors on this anthology project to talk about, the experience and the contents of the book and the impact.
That's awesome. I just want to let you know that I had such a good time reading each story because I feel that in every single story that we can resonate with it. So thank you with that. I am going to start out with asking you this question. What happens when we give voice to what we once silenced, and how can storytelling help us reclaim power over our bodies and our lives? I know that's powerful. That's a huge question.
Yeah, that's a big one. Well, I really think that, when we give voice to what we once silenced, something really profound happens. At least it did for me, and I know it did for my fellow co-authors in this anthology. the shame begins to dissolve and the isolation, I like to think, starts to soften. Um, and storytelling transforms the body from a place of fear into more of a vessel for truth. And it allows us to reclaim our agency to become the authors of our own story, not just in the characters living through a breast cancer diagnosis. So, I mean, every time one of us speaks our truth out loud, I think we give each other permission, other women, to do the same. And that's the ripple effect, I think, of courage. It turns, pain into purpose and wounds into wisdom. And through storytelling, we reconnect with our bodies, our communities, and certainly for me, my inner strength. And we begin to rewrite that narrative that was handed to us, shifting from mere survival to a deeper becoming. And I know for myself, the survival for me was, in my story, was like from birth. And what breast cancer did was just kind of rip that wound, that scab off,
Yep.
and expose the wound that I really had to address. So because in the end, I think storytelling isn't just expression. I think of it as liberation. It's how we remember who we are and how we rise after something like a breast cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And I've read your story before. You do have a powerful story, and you've just sort of come full circle, and you have been allowed to amplify other people's stories. And I really resonate with this storytelling because that and writing for you all, that is why I started the podcast in the first place, was to be able to amplify voices and to help people understand that they are not alone. And there are so many things that we can connect with. So thank you for that. Well, I would love to bring on our first co author, April Stearns. We are talking about how illness does not just change a body, it reveals the stories that were living there all along. I'm so grateful to be joined by April Stearns, founder and editor in chief of Fire Journal and Writing Community, and author of the essay Forged in the Fire on illness, motherhood, and becoming a first generation cycle breaker. In her piece, April brings us into the moment her 4-year-old daughter sees her after surgery, into that hot tub scene where a little girl is staring at her mother who has come home without a breast, and into the fear that their bond might fracture the way her own bond with her mother did. From there, she traces a much bigger story, healing from generational trauma, learning that rest does not have to be abandonment, and discovering that strength is not pretending you are fine. It is letting yourself be a human in front of your child and still choosing connection. April shows us how cancer can be both fire and forge, how it can threaten to repeat old patterns, and also become the place where a mother decides this cycle stops with me. April, thank you for being here. It's so great to have you. How are you doing?
Hi, Jamie. I'm doing great. Thanks for that intro. It's nice
Yeah.
to hear our stories kind of reflected back at us. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and I love that. And I get your Wildfire magazine thanks to Jillian each month. I actually just saw something in my mailbox that one's on the way. So I'm excited about that. Well, I have a question for you. How did cancer become a mirror, not just for your body's changes, but for the relationship with your mother and your daughter?
Ugh, I love this question. So, yeah, my essay chapter in the book is all about this reckoning that happened kind of 13 years after my diagnosis. In the writing of it, I'm back there with my daughter. Like you said, she was 4 when we were going through this, 3 when I was diagnosed, and then turning 4. But writing this really put me back to being a child and experiencing that original illness scenario with my own mother. She had a pretty severe, I guess for her, maybe for anyone, personality disorder. And the way that that manifested in our house was we all walked on eggshells around her. That illness was the center, and we all orbited around it. I can distinctly remember standing outside my front door after getting off the school bus, kind of listening to see, is it a good day? Is it a bad day? And there was so much fear and pain in my childhood that I ultimately wasn't sure that I was going to be a mom at all. And so in the chapter, I wrote about how I finally came to that decision after my mom passed away. And it wasn't arrived at easily because I was scared that I might either become my mom, myself, or maybe give birth to her. That was very terrifying for me. I didn't know how to handle any of that. I hadn't really learned a lot of coping skills growing up beyond just white knuckling it and just surviving it. And so then I reached that decision, had my daughter, and then cancer came. And I was sure that cancer was going to put me back into that position of becoming my mom. And that was really scary to me. Even more scary to me than my mortality was what that cancer was going to do to my daughter. Was she now going to have that same experience of tiptoeing through the house? The cancer would be the thing, that was ruling everything. And it was really interesting through the writing process, and truly I learned so much in writing it that I thought I had already healed, but I realized in writing it that my mom had a choice, and she didn't have a choice of having that personality disorder. She didn't have a choice of any of that. Same as me, I didn't choose cancer, but she did have a choice of how it became centered in our family. And I realized through writing it how much I had worked to not let cancer be the thing, in our family with my daughter. We regularly took adventures from Cancerland where we did other stuff and only talked about it if she wanted to talk about it. I did a lot of work to have things in place to make the days that I spent in chemo easier for her. And then I wrote about trying to make this experience of my mastectomy easier for her too. I can tell you that is the cycle breaking. Like, my mom didn't do any of that, or at least it wasn't apparent to me that she did any of that. Rather, it just was her disappearing from me, her withdrawing from me, taking her love away from me, everything in service of her illness. And yeah, it was hard to come face to face with that, to see that in that mirror of writing the chapter, but extremely healing for me as well, and gratifying to see how
Yeah.
far I had come.
Yeah. You seem to be a very introspective type person. I have quite a few friends in my circle who have had those kinds of experiences where they have been the cycle breaker. So kudos to you. That's
Thank
amazing.
you.
I really appreciate your sharing that. And your piece is extremely powerful. And I highly recommend people to read that. Well, thank you very much. And my next guest is Melissa Andersen, and in this segment we're talking about reclaiming the body, not in a neat inspirational way, but in a real messy, deeply human way. It actually happens. I'm so grateful, Melissa, that you are joining us. Your essay is Becoming the Soil the Seeds Need, traces your journey through breast cancer, prairie fires, chronic pain, and the strange, tender work of learning to live in a changed body. Melissa takes us from the biopsy room to the chemo chair to standing topless in front of a mirror the night before her mastectomies, and finally to the tattoo studio where her scarred chest becomes a swallowtail butterfly among zinnias. Along the way, she discovers that anger and grief aren't weaknesses, they're proof she's still alive. Melissa doesn't sugarcoat survival. She shows us how beauty and pain can live in the same breath, and what it really means to reclaim your body and your humanity at the same time. Wow, I resonate with that, Melissa. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing very well.
Good,
Thank you.
good. I really would love to see that tattoo. I actually got myself a big tattoo on the back of my neck for similar purposes. Anyway,
I
so
mean, I have
I'm
it like it probably peeks out a little if you're on the, yeah, you can see it on
oh
my,
yeah, let's
just
do
like,
it.
hello.
I
Yeah.
love that. Yep. I thank you for showing that. The question I want to ask you is, when you think about reclaiming your body through that tattoo, through surgeries and through writing and ritual, what has it taught you about being fully alive and fully human?
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a great question. There's a lot to unpack in that question. I think for me, for much of my life, I ignored the messages my body was trying to send me. I think I often just sort of tried to live in my head and not fully in my body, and not understanding that, my body is trying to tell me things. And if it was, I kind of wrote it off as like, I'm being too sensitive, or, I have to kind of buck up, right? Like growing up in a culture that really seemed to celebrate grit and resilience in a way that is, not showing hard emotions. I talk about how I'm a first generation college student. And for me, that meant working really hard to try to be successful, in a landscape that didn't feel like it was made for me a lot of the time. And so I didn't allow myself hard emotions. I sort of, anytime they came up, I stuffed them down because I wanted to make sure that I could be successful, and so I worked really hard. And you can read in my chapter, I burned out as an educator because I had poor boundaries, and wasn't able to really show up for myself in the way that I needed to. And I certainly didn't pay attention to, how things showed up in my body. And I became this victim of chronic stress after a while. And in the last few years, I've done quite a bit of work somatically to try to like connect with my body in different ways and honor this vessel that we're given. And I've learned a lot about how our bodies store unresolved trauma, right? And for me, breast cancer was the thing that sort of broke it all open for me. It forced me to confront things about my body and the anger that I had with my body that I didn't really realize that I actually had for a long time. And I had to overcome some of that, because when I faced breast cancer, it was during 2020. I was diagnosed with breast cancer the same week that the entire world went into the COVID lockdown, right? So we were all in this collective crisis together. Meanwhile, I had just gone through a career transition, so I was trying to find my way there. George Floyd was murdered, several miles from my home. So my collective community that I live in was grieving that. And so there was so many things all at once, right? And then I'm going through chemo and I'm super sick and, and all of that. And I'm isolated because I'm sick, right? So I was very angry. I just was carrying a lot of anger. And, for me, the things that I've had to do, to try to face some of that, has really helped me recognize the various lessons our bodies are holding and trying to teach us. It's been figuring out how to connect with my body and really allow myself some grace. And the writing and the tattoo and all of those pieces have been little steps along the way that have helped me explore those things. It forced, writing this chapter forced me to sit and unpack some of that hard stuff. And there's, a lot I didn't even include in the chapter. So, but it was really healing for me. And I recognized that, that existence of joy and pain together, right? How they can sit side by side in the same moment. And that complexity is something that we all have to navigate.
Right. I was just going to say, it seems like we all have to navigate that. It's just such a common theme about forgiveness and being angry and giving ourselves grace. I definitely resonate with that as well. Thank you for sharing that, Melissa. I appreciate that. And I love your tattoo. I'll have to show you mine sometime. It's on the back of my neck, so I don't get to see it, but I got it done in Costa Rica. And that was a really cool thing. I was going to put it on my arm, but then they were like, yeah, you've had lymph nodes removed. So no. So now I can't even see my own tattoo unless I'm looking at the back of my hair. Okay. Thank you for that, Melissa. So our next guest in this segment, we are exploring faith, family, and the sacred ordinary, and what it means to live with both faith and fear in the same breath. I'm joined right now by Sarah Zsak, a mother of four, a speech language pathologist, and the author of Time with My Babies. Her story takes us from the chaos of daily life, soccer fields, carpools, and church community into the stillness of diagnosis that changed everything. Through her words, we see what it means to fight for more time, to pray for another season with the people you love most, and to find holiness in the most ordinary moments: dinner tables, sunlight through the pine branches, the small grace of getting to tuck your kids in again. Sarah's story reminds us that miracles often live in the mundane, and that surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting that love is still the strongest force in the room. Sarah, hello, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, absolutely. I have a question for you. This is kind of loaded as well. How do you hold faith and fear in the same breath? And what role has writing played in helping you live inside that paradox?
Well, I'm still kind of putting this together, so bear with me. But I guess to me, I don't see it as much as a paradox as maybe more of like a tutorial. Before breast cancer, I was, nice, but not much of a helper person, if that makes sense. And, I always thought I'd have time later to make it right. And I was pretty focused on career advancement. And I would say that breast cancer jumped into my life, and then everything changed. And I was able to see just how fleeting life is, how quick, how you don't always have that time to make it right. You just kind of have now. And I feel like breast cancer, brought me to the edge of a cliff, the cliff that we all have to let go of when our time is
Right.
up, and allowed me to look over early. And it gave me some really good perspective. And I think the fear of leaving, and I should say that the writing really helped me to kind of process that perspective and really get into the meat of it. But the fear of leaving my children early grabbed my attention. Not being there to care for them like happens to so many people. And it put a spotlight on, the true nature of life on earth, right? And I don't think I would have the depth of faith that I have now if it wasn't for that fear.
I like it. Interesting. You all have such different stories that are so powerful, and I like that there are some similarities and some that are so different from each other that we can all kind of come together and create this wonderful platform of stories that will definitely resonate with other people. I highly recommend people get this book. We will have the link in the show notes so that people can grab onto that. Okay, so now we're going to come back around to Gillian to wrap this up. Gillian, I want to talk to you about your reflection on the alchemy of becoming. Tell me what you love most about this collection.
Yeah, sure. So, Rising Above, Our Transformational Journey to Wholeness After Breast Cancer is what the title of the anthology is called. It brings together a collection of voices of young women whose lives were, suddenly interrupted by breast cancer, women who were building careers and falling in love and stepping into motherhood and discovering who they were. And this anthology goes beyond stories of survival, which I love so much. It goes so much deeper than just the breast cancer experience. It's what breast cancer has taught us about moving forward and who we really are. It's about transformation and what happens when we turn toward our pain and use it as a doorway back to ourselves. And, each chapter explores a different kind of healing, through motherhood, through faith, through body, through voice. And these stories are raw and lyrical and deeply human. So there's something in the pages of this book for everyone, not just breast cancer survivors. There are a lot of lessons, and they show us that when we tell the truth of our experience, through doing that, I believe we begin to heal, not just ourselves, but others who are also like walking similar paths. So together, these narratives form like what I kind of envision like a tapestry of this resilience and this incredible sisterhood that we have within our young breast cancer community. And they remind us that wholeness is still possible even after that rupture, which Melissa alluded to there. And at its heart, the Rising Above anthology is like is a sanctuary of voices, and we need to remember that it's not just storytelling; it's raising awareness, and that awareness is saving lives. So, what I love most about this anthology is how each woman's story reveals a different facet of that healing. So, and together as that tapestry, they form something whole. So with April's story, she reminds us that healing can be generational, that it's when we face our pain, we begin to break the cycle we inherited and mother ourselves back into wholeness. And I 100% related to your story, April, and your experience going into motherhood, because um, there's a lot of threads within April's story that remind me of my own experience. And Melissa shows us that healing is also embodied, that scars aren't symbols of what's been lost. They're evidence of, what's been transformed, which to me is, for me, in my own experience, is something really beautiful. I look at myself when I'm naked in front of the mirror. I no longer look like want to, hide my eyes to what I'm
Right.
seeing. It's a testament to what I've been through and what I've learned. And Sarah teaches us that healing can be sacred, and that it's when we surrender into faith and presence, grace enters the room, and even just during the hardest moments. So for me, through my own chapter, the alchemy of becoming, I've learned that healing is a continual process of dissolving what's false. I've told myself a whole lot of false narratives through my life, so that you know our truest light can emerge through all those cracks. So, together, these stories show that rising above isn't about moving past what happened. It's about like integrating it, and it's about turning rupture into rebirth. And when we share our stories, we become mirrors to one another, which is what I love so much about this book. We remind each other that even after devastation, beauty, purpose, and love they're all still possible. And to me, that's the alchemy of storytelling. It's turning that pain into gold, and that isolation into sisterhood, and that survival into a deeper kind of life moving forward.
Love it. I love that so much. I was just talking to a friend of mine right before our interview, and I was telling her that this particular book is not just for breast cancer survivors. This is for survivors, just, with any kind of generational trauma, any, deaths in the family, things that we've told ourselves. I tend to tell myself false things as well. And so it's always nice to talk to people who do the same thing. It's like, okay, we're not alone. We're not alone, right? So thank you so much, ladies, for being on the show. I have a couple of reflection questions that I want to ask for you to share with our audience. I would love, April, for you to share, what does rising above mean to you now that you've written this piece and have shared your story?
Good question. I think it was said earlier in our conversation, but I think I know now that for me, rising above the cancer experience means kind of remembering who I was at my core, which I didn't even know who she was really, until I went through this experience of cancer, including the writing that I've done around it and writing this chapter. So I think that rising above for me really means getting back in touch with who I am on the most deep level. And it means acceptance, and being okay with it being kind of messy to figure all this stuff out, and knowing that, to take a line from my own chapter, that we are forged in the toughest fires, and we will become something on the other side, just as Gillian just said about alchemy. I really resonate with that.
Yeah, very powerful. Thank you. Sarah, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to piggyback on that, you know, above meaning better than, like higher than you were before breast cancer, before whatever, metamorphosis you've been able to undergo because of breast cancer. So, I learned a term called anti-fragile while I was sick. And I'm going to, word finding chemo brain. I'm going to mess up the name, but I think it was Nassim Nicholas Taleb, something thereabouts. He coined this phrase, which is basically like next level resilience. So it's like not just returning to what was, but seeing the opportunity that's possible because of that disruption, which I've found really meaningful. And I've found a lot of meaning in sort of the old wisdom, old sayings, like you can't take it with you, living on borrowed time. Like those are timeless for a reason. And, I came to the conclusion definitely far from perfect, but I've come to the conclusion that the only thing that really matters is at the end of the day is just love, relationships, and the kindness that we show each other. That's it. That's all you can take with you. So with, I'm trying to be my own version of above where I was and making tiny steps. I go frequently still to Baltimore, Johns Hopkins Hospital, and along the route, there are, unfortunately, often people that are very down on their luck. And at the beginning, I didn't do this, but this is small, but I've started bringing a box of Kind bars, and I hand them out when I can be close enough to someone. And we just had the end of all the sports seasons for kids just ended, and we have a softball coach, two coaches who've been season after season really working hard, and just somehow we just always missed getting them a gift. And so this time I said, why don't we collect a gift? And we had $400 for 2 gift cards, and it was nice to be able to facilitate something like that. And now I'm the one saying I'll give her a ride, I'll give him a ride. And I just cooked a meal for someone other than my kiddos and my husband, and I got to feel what it felt like to be the one with the pot roast slopping around in the back of the van. And it feels great. And to me, it's above what I was.
I love that. I love that kindness. Melissa, what about you? What does it mean to you now, rising above?
Yeah, I mean, similarly to what we've already heard, as far as like what this means is really, for me, it's living into my most authentic version of myself, right? Like really showing up um in all of the messy ways that I might show up, and just embracing all of it. Because when we think about, it's like the title of my chapter about becoming the soil the seeds need. If we cannot accept ourselves, and if we can't show up authentically, we're not going to be able to help others, right? We're not going to be able to grow anything else, including ourselves. And so how do I, think about how I'm showing up for my body, for myself, for others? Is it my most authentic version? And to me, that's, if I can do that, if I can really learn how to do that, that to me is rising above.
Love that. April, I want to come back to you. I would like to ask you if you could tell one truth to another young woman just beginning her journey, what would it be?
That's a really good question. What's coming to mind is, what do they say? Worst club, best people. None of us would choose this by any means, but I have also received so many gifts from just being in community with other people who've experienced cancer as well. And the support the support is there. If you are going through it, if you're new to it, I know it's really, really scary. It's really, really hard. And you will be held if you allow yourself to be seen and vulnerable here. And I think there is a gift in that.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, that's very good. Good advice there. Sarah, what about you? If you could tell one truth to another young woman just beginning her journey, what would it be?
Yeah. I mean, the main thing that comes to mind, like all the truth that has been spoken is resonating with me, but the main thing that I think is really evergreen on my end is just you you probably would find it very difficult to believe right now. Or maybe you wouldn't, but it's possible that it wouldn't seem like it. But something good can come of this down the road. It's hard to
Yeah.
see it, but
Well,
have the faith. Yeah.
you had you had said something about, when you were talking about rising above. I feel like a lot of us have gone through a period of time where we think, okay, we're broken. We are not, we're not as good as we used to be. And I definitely went through that, but I do, now that I've gone through the journey and met folks like you and heard your stories, I feel like collectively good can come out of it. And I feel that just doing this podcast interview with all of you is something that is good that has come out of this. And Melissa, what about you? What would you tell someone who is just going through this journey?
Yeah, I would say, learn to say yes to help, learn to say yes to community, um, and be okay, asking for help and admitting when things are hard, because I think that was a hurdle that I had, was, trying to be strong and trying to heal quickly. You don't know how long, like that could take a long time, right? Like let it come, and take the time it needs to. That doesn't mean, stay there forever, right? Like, but say yes to the healing, say yes to the things that feel good, and kind of like everyone else said, like say yes to the community. Like I have met some of the most amazing women in the last 5 years, and I mean, if I would have said no to all those opportunities, I would, like, that's part of my journey as well, right? That's part of my growth. And so, yeah, just say yes to the things that matter.
Yeah, I love it. Those are all really great reflections. Thank you, ladies, so much. Gillian, I'm going to turn my attention to you now. I would love for you to give us a little reflection on your experience and just anything you would like to say to end this episode.
So much that can be said. And I really believe that we rise above not by surviving, but by transforming. And that's what rising above is truly about, transformation, not just of the body, but of the soul. And each of us here has learned that awareness begins with authenticity. And that's why this collaboration with Test Those Breasts feels so meaningful to me, not only because I just adore you and all you do, Jamie, because because awareness is not only about scans and self checks. It's about checking in with your heart and our stories and with one another in the community. So it really aligns with what we do at I Rise Above. Our foundation, our mission is to empower young women to live fully, to rise emotionally and physically and spiritually after breast cancer. So if there's, one message I hope listeners take away, it's that your story matters and that your body is sacred, and your voice, whether it's spoken or written, has the power to heal. And that power can help rise to lift others in their journey. And that's really what we are doing here, and sharing the wisdom that we've learned through contributing to this anthology.
I love that. I appreciate your doing that. I just think it all just comes full circle, and it's definitely touched my heart reading your stories and talking with you further about them. So, in closing, I would like to give each one of you an opportunity to, say something, whatever you'd like to say, just to our audience. I do like this mantra, writing as medicine. What can you leave us with, that might be helpful to other people? April, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I'm passionate about writing as a healing tool for sure. I would absolutely encourage everyone to give it a shot. The type of healing or the type of writing, rather, that is the most healing is expressive writing. And expressive writing is the kind of writing that really asks you what you feel about a situation. And so, if someone wanted to get started with writing, I would just say, start with what I really want to say is, and lean into that, always coming back to how you feel about it. And if you're writing about an experience you had, like, also ask, how did I feel going through that? How do I feel about it now? But that can be a really powerful entry point onto the page, and just see where it goes. Thanks, Jamie.
I love that. I used to be a writing teacher, and it was so hard to get students to just start putting stuff on paper. But once they started and finally came up with their piece, they felt so good about it. And most of my kids love doing that reflective, creative type writing. So thank you.
Hmm.
Sarah, how
Absolutely.
about you? What would you like to leave us with?
Well, on the theme of writing as medicine, I'd say everybody's probably different, but I feel like I process best through writing. I guess I need the
Mhm.
time. I'm not sure. But and there's a lot to process with breast cancer. So, all the amazing things that have happened in that context. And um for me, it's hard not to believe after, everything I've experienced, and I feel almost a duty to tell people about that or to get it down on paper. And so that's been very relieving to me that I can, put this witness on the paper, and I feel like, okay, I've lived up to the gift that this was.
Right. And I like this kind of book because at the beginning, people used to say, "Hey, Jamie, you should write a book." I'm like, I don't know if I want to write a book. Podcasting was, and verbally speaking to people,
Yeah.
was much more up my alley. But now that I'm thinking about it, doing a book like you have put together, Gillian, and having people write chapters, that feels like it may not necessarily be as overwhelming as writing an entire book, just on your own. And so I like the idea of putting several stories in a book. So
And
kudos to you. That's awesome.
just to clarify, not gift of cancer, gift of like appointments and
Oh,
you know, I was like, oh boy, that's that's not true. I mean, from my perspective, I see it as like a severe, severe blessing. But I mean, other things that came through for us that can't naturally be explained. Mhm.
yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. And how about you, Melissa?
Yeah, and thinking about, writing and how, that's been healing for me. But we worked with Jessica Buchanan, who, leads Soul Speak Press, is the publisher of the book. And I remember in our first meeting, she told all of us about, a memoir. Memoir is when, you've been through something, you've learned something, and you have something to offer, something to share. And I believe we all have a memoir in us, whether we write
Mm,
it or talk about it, right? I think we all have those stories that matter, and those stories that have the power to transform not only ourselves, but also, hold up a mirror for someone else so that they can be transformed, that they can be healed. And I find that like so powerful. And I just think that, our stories, while all of ours are so different, like there will be people that resonate with them, whether they're breast cancer survivors or not.
mhm.
And so I just think that's so powerful. it's such a gift for people.
Incredibly powerful. Well, thank you so much, ladies. Gillian, I would like to leave you with, we have a call to action for people. What can we leave our audience with?
Well, from my own experience, going through originally being diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer and later as metastatic, I've been at this for a long time. I'm in my 13th year of dealing with it. And, no matter how much support I have around me, at the end of the day, this is my journey and I'm walking it. And sometimes when you're on that journey, or when I'm on this journey, it can feel isolating, and there's a lot to process, to Sarah's point, all along the way. And to be able to use expressive writing to take the feelings that you have within your body that are, because they're stored there, it's taking up room, right? So if you can use the tool of expressive writing to bring your thoughts and feelings together and formulate them and really, really look at them for what they are, that can be extremely liberating. It can be such a freeing feeling that once you've kind of worked through that, it allows room for other things to enter. And I can't say enough about that when, someone is diagnosed, like newly diagnosed, or any point within their, breast cancer walk, that writing is such an important tool. So I would highly recommend, as a call to action, to pick up our book. It's available on Amazon, and I think it's going to be linked to show notes. My dear friend April, Wildfire Magazine, offers lots of options for expressive writing, memoir writing. And we partnered through the I Rise Above Foundation to offer that for free to people that want to be able to take that. I hope we'll be doing that again in the new year, just seeing how it really transforms people's experiences in such a positive way. It really warms my heart, and I want that for all people who are, struggling with their breast cancer experience.
Yeah, that may be a good call to action for me personally. Well, great. I just, I think that it's such a great idea to write, and I've thoroughly enjoyed reading every one of your pieces. And April and Sarah and Melissa and Gillian, I very much appreciate your being on this 100th episode of Test Those Breasts. And to my audience, my call to action to you, of course, is to always self-check, make sure that you are advocating for yourself, get yourself to the doctor if you feel that something is not right in your body. You know your body best, and you get to decide on, whether you should have to get a mammogram or ultrasound if you need to know if you have dense breast tissue. That's always my call to action. And we will see you next time on the next episode of Test Those Breasts. Bye for now. Friends, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I hope you got some great, much needed information that will help you with your journey. As always, I am open to guests to add value to my show, and I'm also open to being a guest on other podcasts where I can add value. So please reach out if you'd like to collaborate. My contact information is in the show notes. And as a reminder, rating, reviewing, and sharing this podcast will truly help build a bigger audience all over the world. I thank you for your efforts. I look forward to sharing my next episode of Test Those Breasts.